This is the September 17, 2020 regular meeting of the Housing, Land Use, Environment, and Transportation Committee, 10 a.m.
September compadre, Supervisor Joe Simidian, and we will open this meeting and start with public comment. And public comment.
Excuse me, Supervisor, we do need to do a quick roll call.
I'm sorry, I thought I was acknowledging that by saying that. Go right ahead.
I apologize. Vice Chairperson Simidian.
Present.
And Chairperson Wasserman.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We now move on to item number 2 of the agenda, which is public comment. And for everyone listening, public comment is your opportunity to speak on anything not on today's agenda. So if you're calling up about any of the items 4 through 15, you will have an opportunity during those times when those items are heard to speak. And Jess, if you could please tell me, how many people do we have lined up?
This is Peggy, and one moment, please.
Peggy, thank you.
We have 3 speakers.
Okay, so each of the speakers will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Our first speaker is Scott Largent. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good morning, everyone. Scott Largent.
Morning.
I had to switch over from the teleconference. I'm actually been listening in on Department 41 at the Hall of Justice. It's Judge Geffon's department, and it's the disqualification right now of the District Attorney's Office for the CCW case. It is eye-opening information. I mean, just sitting here, well, I shouldn't say eye-opening, ear-opening. They've been denying people access to the courthouse, but I think this little loophole right now is really going to allow people to understand the corruption that's going on in our county and what our district attorney is up to. The number for dialing in for that is 866-390-1828, and you enter in 239-3120 and then press pound, and you can listen to what's actually really going on in Santa Clara County. I'm just a little old Scott, but I've dealt with a lot of the same type of harassment from our district attorney's office. I've been maliciously prosecuted now for almost 5 years over my First Amendment rights. You're all very familiar with me. You do not stand side by side with the public. You do not support my constitutional rights or the public's constitutional rights. And you're allowing the DA just to railroad people like myself. And the people that lose are my daughter. My daughter's going to lose out. She hasn't had a father in her life. Come December, 5 years sober. And, you know, I just got to get to a point where I don't beg you people to do your job because you haven't. Most of you are being tied into all sorts of different little buckets of corruption in our county. And we just need to clean shop. I don't want these dirty dogs in our government. And this has been very, very frustrating. I plan on trying to disqualify the district attorney's office. You know, a main thing with them and the problems with my little case in a way is that they control victim services. And after 1 month of me going in there, I mean, I damn near, it was like I had a glad bag over my head.
Confirming that the
Continue, Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Did we get cut off?
No, there was another voice came in, then it went. Go right ahead.
Oh, okay, that happens. Put your mic, put your mic on mute, Joe. Okay. But you guys are getting what I'm coming at right here. You guys need to start chiming in and realize what's really going on. They denied me services, so it's like throwing a glad bag over somebody's head and making them run in circles. Jeffrey Francis Frozen Rosen would not enforce my visitation order for 2 years, and he did it basically. It was a political thing. Victorious and I took it to him in there. We made fun of his sexual details, the fact he faked hands, and you know, I thought it was pretty damn funny. And you know, what he did retaliating was unacceptable. He needs to get some thick skin.
Peggy, next speaker.
Next speaker is Adam Cosner. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good morning. My name is Adam Cosner. I'm the president of the Santa Clara County Firefighters Union. More importantly, in my belief, I'm a firefighter. I'm a firefighter and I'm tired. I'm tired of every time the tones go off, we're en route to the largest wildland fire in our state's history. I'm tired of my group of guys going to the hospital, and I'm tired of our rigs getting burned over. We're seeing fire behavior that has never been seen before. The best thing about being a firefighter is that we're constantly working to be better. We are constantly looking for ways to improve our service. I sat up last night at my firehouse and read the public comment letters. It was nice to see how many people care about their fire response in the Los Altos Hills. Yet it's disappointing to see how a misinformation campaign has skewed that concern. This misinformation campaign has led the citizens of this district to believe that consolidation would, and I quote, reduce the budget and service allocated to our city, resulting in an unacceptable increase of wildland fire risk.
The interruption, Mr. Chairman. I believe this is not public comment generally, but on agendized item item 4. Am I?
Four. Yes, it's item 4 and 5.
I'm sorry.
Yep. Adam, you'll get a chance to speak in a few minutes again.
I apologize.
We're going to be hearing items 4 and 5 together. It was a disclaimer I made at the beginning of the meeting. You might have logged on shortly thereafter. So anybody else wishing to speak about the items 4 and 5 regarding the Los Altos Hills County Fire District, please wait until we've finished with public comment. Then we'll have consent calendar, which will go quickly, and then we'll move on to the regular agenda. Thank you, Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you.
And our last speaker did drop off, so we have no further speakers for public comment.
Thank you. So that concludes public comment, Supervisor Simidian. We now move on to item 3, which is approval of the consent calendar, which currently includes items 8 through 15. Peggy, do we have anyone yet wishing to speak on any of the items 8 through 15?
One moment.
And anyone
We
else?
have no speakers.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Simidian, do you wish to pull anything or make a motion?
I'm happy to move approval of the consent calendar as contained in our published agenda, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Supervisor Simidian, seconded by Wasserman for approval of consent items 8 through 15. And Peggy, you still don't have any speakers at this time, correct?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. That'll conclude those items. We now move on to
Excuse me. Apologies, Supervisor Wasserman, but we do need a roll call vote. So sorry.
Sure.
Vice Chairperson.
Yep, go ahead.
Vice Chairperson Simidian
Simidian, aye.
and Chairperson Wasserman.
Wasserman, aye.
Thank you.
Well, I always forget that when we have one supervisor make a motion, the other one second it. But,
It
you
seems silly. It seems
Thank you.
silly, but we're told that's what's required.
No, keep us in line. We're a couple of renegades, that's for sure. All right, now we move on to item number 4. Supervisor Simidian, items 4 and 5 are very similar. My suggestion would be that we hear them together, if that's acceptable to you. And if so, I'd like you to, I'm also thinking perhaps that we hear from you first before we go into hearing from speakers. They can have the benefit of hearing what it is you're thinking. Is that agreeable with you?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I think if it's agreeable to you, if we're going to join the 2 items, 4 and 5, what I would suggest is I have some questions. I'll then offer some comments, make a motion on both the Los Altos Hills County Fire District audit as well as the South County audit, ask you for a second, and then before we go to the roll call, hear from the public so that they can offer comment knowing what it is that's on the table for action and share their views. Does that work for you, Mr. Chairman?
That certainly does. Go right ahead.
All right, thank you. So I have a couple of questions and comments, as I said, before we get to the heart of the matter. I think it would be helpful if Mr. Mitra from County Council is on the line, if I could just confirm with him the fact that one of the recommendations, item, let me just double check it here, 5.1 deals with contracting issues, and it's one where we had already reached partial agreement. The fire district and the auditor had reached partial agreement. But I think we can get to full agreement today if Mr. Mitra can confirm for us that, in fact, using the county's contracting policies and procedures consistent with Chapter 5 of our policy manual does not require actually doing the procurement with county staff or the director or county director of procurement. Mr. Mitra, that's my understanding from working with your office. Do I have that correct?
Yes, Supervisor Simitian, you have that correct. This is Steve Mitra, Assistant County Counsel.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, the reason I mention that is because, as you will recall, there are 7 recommendations in the Los Altos Hills County Fire District audit. And I really do appreciate the fact we've had a little time to try and work some of these issues through over the course of the summer, because at this point, we now have confirmation from the district that they agree with and either are implementing or have already implemented 6 of the 7 recommendations. So the substantive recommendations that are in the audit have all been either agreed to and or already complied with. And the one that remains is item, and I just want to check my item number here to make sure I'm referencing the right number, 1.2, which was a recommendation to suspend the delegation of authority to the Fire Commission. But that is no longer, in my view, relevant or appropriate, because that recommendation was necessary in the view of the auditor only to address concerns about 1.1, which was the contracting processes. And now that that issue has been addressed and the district has both agreed to hold off on any such future contracts and has retained, as of last month, our own county counsel's office as their legal counsel, no need to suspend the delegation of authority in 1.2 to protect against the concern that was addressed in 1.1, since 1.1 has now already been addressed, as I say, in a couple of other ways. So that leaves us in a very good place, in my judgment, which is that we can move forward with what a motion that I'll make in a moment or two, which is to simply move forward the 7-item audit recommendations with favorable recommendation on all 6 of the items where there is agreement, and with a recommendation against on item 1.2, which was the delegation of authority. I think that gets us to a very good place. And I do just want to express some concern, since we got some preliminary comment under public comment. I think it's unfortunate, frankly, that these audits have been used as a pretext for consolidation. That's not what our audit process is for. Our audit process, which we use for our own departments and agencies, is designed to say, how can we do things better? How can we make money, save money, do things more efficiently, do things more effectively? That's the appropriate purpose of these audits. There are always going to be a little scratchiness. None of us likes to have our work product second guessed or judged. I understand that. There's going to be some pushback. But that's why I think it was so helpful and important to take a little time and let the district and the auditor have some back and forth after the audit was issued, because we've gotten to a very good place. As you and I sometimes joke, Mr. Wasserman, sometimes you want to take yes for an answer. And fortunately, we can take yes for an answer on all 6 of the substantive recommendations. And because we can take yes for an answer on all 6 of the substantive recommendations, we can then say no and reject the delegation of authority recommendation, which was only relevant because of the concern about the other substantive issues. I indicated I am frustrated, disappointed I think it's regrettable, frankly, that audits are being used as the pretext for consolidation. I think it's very important, and I'm going to ask if Cheryl Soloff is on the line in the meeting with us, Mr. Chairman. I can't see from my display, but I believe she is there. She is.
Yeah.
Ms. Soloff, I'm just going to ask a couple of quick questions. I'm looking at the Los Altos Hills County Fire District documents, and there's a cover letter, there's an executive summary, and then there's 60+ pages of audit report that you and your team have pulled together. Nowhere in that document is there any mention, let alone recommendation, with regard to consolidation. And then when I look to the South County audit, which we're going to get to in a minute, again, there is a reference there, but there's not a recommendation. I want to underscore that again, Mr. Chairman. There is not a recommendation with respect to consolidation. What there is in that document is the suggestion that our Board of Supervisors should look at a range of possibilities going forward, including consolidation, but also including a JPA, also including district expansion, service areas, tax measures, revenue sharing. Ms. Soloff, have I characterized what is or isn't in the two audit reports accurately?
That's correct.
Thank you. And Mr. Wasserman, as you know, our auditors at Harvey Rose are not shy. If they had wanted to make a recommendation about consolidation, presumably they would have. There is no mention of it whatsoever in the Los Altos Hills County Fire District audit. And there is simply a reference among a half dozen other issues that need to be considered going forward in the South County audit. So, I think it's important that we focus on that as we go through the exercise. So what I would like to do is, as I say in a minute, I will offer up a motion that we approve the recommendations in the audit, forward it to our board with a favorable recommendation, with the exception of item 1.2, which is the delegation of authority. And I'll ask folks to double check that I have the right number when I'm referencing 1.2. That, of course, takes us to the South County audit. And the South County audit is one where there were even more recommendations, 15. As I look, and forgive me, I'm going to pull the grid out here so I have it right in front of me. As I look at the grid in terms of the recommendations, there are 9 items that really are not directed to our board. They are directed to the Board of Commissioners in the South County. And then there are 6 items that are addressed to our Board of Supervisors. And on all of them, the South County District has indicated that they either agree or partially agree. And I would be prepared in a moment to offer a motion that says, hey, we're open to, not open to, we support all 6 of those recommendations, which includes consideration of a range of options going forward, as I said, JPAs, consolidation, tax measures, revenue sharing, reliance on Prop 170, all of those. But with one addition, Mr. Chairman, so I want to look you in the eyes virtually so you know clearly what my one addition is, and that, thank you, and that is that any of these evaluations where we've been asked to consider, assess, examine, review, also include, not be limited to, but also include the continued use of service zones. This was an area that was not referenced in my recollection in the South County report. And if we're going to go forward and have those discussions, and I'm supportive of that, I'd just like to make sure that we not lose sight of the continued use of service zones, which is a structure that is already embedded in our system. So if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, I can make that as a motion and see if I can get a second, and then that will let the public know precisely where we are and what it is that's proposing. I do want to say I appreciate the petition from folks who are opposed, from 653 supporters, their support, quote unquote, their opposition to the notion of withdrawing the authority or consolidation. And I have probably 30 or 40 emails and letters, which I'm guessing also made their way to you. Thank you to the clerk for moving those into the system as quickly as possible. So here's my motion. My motion is to receive the management audit of the Los Altos Hills County Fire District, forward to the Board of Supervisors for consideration with a favorable recommendation, except that we forward a negative recommendation on item 1.2, which is to say oppose the suspension of the delegation of authority. And then as to item 5, the motion would be to receive the management audit of the South Santa Clara County Fire District and forward it to the Board of Supervisors for consideration with a favorable recommendation, but also with the addition of consideration of service zones in future, consideration of the use of service zones in any further conversation or deliberation by our board. And
you're just adding the service zones on with the consolidation, JPA, district expansion, whatever, as another alternative not to be excluded at this time.
That's right. And it's,
okay.
I think it comes up actually in, oh gosh, I'm looking at my notes, at least 3 of the recommendations to our board. So in any or all of them, where it says consider options, evaluate options, examine, I would ask that continued use of service zones be added to make sure we have a really full range of topics on the table.
Thank you. So I need a couple of clarifications from me. One from Steve Mitra, one from Cheryl Solov with our Harvey Rose. I'm understanding the motion to be regarding the Los Altos audit, moving them forward with approval of 6 of the 7, and that item 1.2 is really no longer relevant because of another item in there. I believe it was 1.1. Mr. Mitra, is that correct?
Well, I'm not going to, as to whether it's relevant or not is ultimately a policy call for you. I will say that, you know, that the Office of the County Council has been retained by the Los Altos Hills Fire District. We have also opined that the Fire District does not need to use the specific institutions and staff that are required, but whether or not, you know, ultimately there's compliance with county practice and county policies is something that we would have to note on a going forward basis.
Okay, and excluding the one item, I believe is 1.2, doesn't void any of our rights or alternatives. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And the other question, Cheryl, the Supervisor Simitian's motion moving forward, the one on Los Altos, number 2 on the South County audit with the 15 items. Supervisor Simitian, I'm understanding your recommendation is moving all 15 or just 6?
Either way, I mean, I'm happy to move all 15 if you would prefer that, Supervisor. Only 6 of them are recommendations directed to our board.
Agreed. Thank you. Yes, with that change, I would support that motion. And obviously, we're not going to take a vote on that right now before we hear from the people of the public. And I think what you said was very clear. And I'm hoping all those people that heard the motion as it was made, that I seconded, will understand that. Supervisor Simitian, any other comments you have before I turn to public comment regarding items 4 and 5?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Only very briefly, because you asked what I think is the key question about 1.2, and I will just, I'm looking directly at the language. The recommendation had been to suspend, not revoke, but suspend the delegation of authority to the Fire Commission to ensure that the fire district did not enter into new agreements or arrangements to subsidize capital projects of other agencies while the board exercises due diligence per recommendation 1.1. And we have now had the chance to do some due diligence on 1.1, and the district has said we're not going to do that again until and unless it is reviewed and approved by our county council, and the district has retained formally county council, as Mr. Mitra just made it. So that's why, in my judgment, 1.2 is not simply inappropriate, it's just moot. It's no longer relevant. So thank you. I wanted to clarify that for the record.
Thank you. That was my understanding and confirmed as well. And unless you have objection, we'll ask the speakers to speak if they still wish to speak, or perhaps just affirm their support of what is on the floor. That's the direction that I would give. Any other comments you wish?
No, I appreciate the opportunity for folks to be heard, whatever their views. I've got a group of polite and respectful but opinionated constituents, and I'm sure they'll be polite and respectful but opinionated.
Got it. Thank you. Peggy, how many speakers do we have?
We have 2 speakers.
Okay. Since we have 2 and it's under 5, we'll give each of them up to 3 minutes.
One moment. We're still under 5, but it has gone up to 4.
All righty. We'll give it 1 more minute. And gentleman, Adam was speaking before and we cut him off, so he can be one of those people as well. Is your total?
He just raised his hand and we are up to 5 total.
Okay, let's just give this a few more seconds because 5 is our break point as far as 3 minutes or 2 minutes. Peggy, we still at 5?
We are.
Thank you. Then each speaker will have up to 3 minutes.
Our first speaker is P. Mahoney. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Great, thank you. I wholeheartedly support Supervisor Simitian's proposals as a 30-year plus resident of Los Altos Hills who's been paying for our fire protection locally for all those years. I think if the South County is behind on funds, they should look to their own backyard to try to take care of their own fire needs and not be coming to the north to simply reallocate our resources. The Los Altos Hills Fire Department needs their own money for programs like the hydrant replacement program, which they have done very successfully, but there's so much work to do with fire breaks and preventative measures yet to occur. There is much work ahead that needs to be spearheaded locally. When you've been in an evacuation zone, as I have been, and when you pack up your files and you start worrying about what you really think is important to get out of your house, you get religion real quick. And so many of the Los Altos Hills residents and many people, we are the gateway protecting Mountain View, Sunnyvale, parts of Cupertino, Woodside, Portola Valley. So if any place needs to make a stand against fire intrusion, it is here in our creeks, in our pathways. We are choked with much debris from decades of neglect. And I know that the fire department is aware of this and they are trying to proceed to protect us. So anything that can be done to augment that locally, I wholeheartedly support, as do literally hundreds of residents and constituents who live along the 280 corridor, who saw that horrific fire just over the ridge from us. And we're quite concerned that it would come this way. An act of God made the wind go south, and unfortunately for the people in the south of San Mateo County and the north of Santa Cruz County, they bore the brunt of that. So I'll save the rest of the time for others, but please do not screw around with the Los Altos Hills Fire Department. This is the wrong time to be doing so. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Nate Blair. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Chairperson Wasserman, Vice Chair Simidian, thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Nate Blair and I'm a resident of Los Altos Hills. I agree with Vice Chair Simidian's motion and appreciate that. I've read the management audit and the district's response, and I appreciate the time and effort involved in producing the audit and believe that processes such as this bring much needed transparency and accountability to our government and how our tax dollars are spent. I also believe that local control, when done effectively and with proper oversight, produces the best outcomes for the citizenry. The proposal to consolidate the district is not warranted at this time. The dialogue the audit produced between the county and the district has yielded benefits with respect to reforms and improvements, and the idea of removing delegation of authority and consolidating the district renders all those other recommendations moot. It'd be akin to me telling an employee, here are the things you need to do to improve your performance, and by the way, you're fired. Again, for effective governance at all levels of government, we need advocacy of those who know the issues best, combined with effective oversight to ensure accountability. That's what's happening right now between the district and the county and how it should work going forward. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Neil Milkey. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank both the supervisors for reaching a very good outcome today. This was handled very professionally. I think a lot of progress has been made. I think the community here is going to be happy, and I think the community in South County should be happy as well. So thank you for that. I did want to comment on an accusation that we heard earlier, that there has been a campaign of misinformation about consolidation leading to a reduction in funding for fire control in the LAHCFD. I don't think there has been a campaign of misinformation. Of course, very little has been documented about a specific consolidation proposal. So it's very hard for anybody to know what it would really entail and what the implications would be here. But I will comment that in the, I believe it was the September 1st Board of Commissioners meeting, Board of Supervisors, excuse me, Supervisor Cortese commented about consolidation leading to mitigate the general fund burden of fire prevention work. And he also said that, quote, it's a matter of sort of the rich offsetting the poor and the moderate income part of the district kind of holding everything together. So I think it's quite reasonable in the absence of a documented consolidation plan for the Los Altos Hills Fire District community to be very concerned that this is a threat to our fire mitigation efforts. I hope as we go forward that ways are found to help South County if it needs help with more fire prevention. That benefits the entire county. I certainly would support it. But when New Orleans flooded because of Katrina, the solution was not to weaken the levees that held. The solution was to beef up the weaker levees. And I think that's what we should focus on in the case of wildfire prevention for this county. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alan. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I won't take much of your time because the previous speakers have covered much of the issues that I wanted to talk about. I want to thank the committee for the consideration. I want to support the recommendation that Supervisor Simidian has made. And I would like just to remind the supervisors that Proposition 172 was passed over 2 decades ago. The money was intended for public safety. The motion was passed at the time there were devastating fires in Southern California, and the county has not used any of the 172 money for the purpose of fire protection. Like the previous speaker, if other areas need assistance, they should get it. That's what Proposition 172 money was for. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a favorable vote on the motion. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Adam Cosner. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you very much. And I apologize for stepping in when I wasn't supposed to the last time. I want to say, in response to Mr. Mielke, I read your letter last night and I listened to your comments, and I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you've put into this situation. I read the audit. I read it a while ago. I've read it many times. It has concerned me. It has concerned the firefighters that there was apparent mismanagement. I ask that this committee move this item to the board for everybody in the Board of Supervisors to review, not just in committee. So I would oppose that. I would appreciate if we could move this to the board. Thank you. That's all.
And that is our final speaker.
Thank you very much, Peggy. All right, that concludes our public speakers. Supervisor submitted on items 4 and 5. We have a motion on the floor with a second. And unless you have any additional comments, I'll ask Peggy to do a roll call vote.
Well, very, very quickly, if I may, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to, I wasn't going to raise this, but the tossing out of the phrase misinformation campaign was really troubling. And particularly because the reason this has turned into a bit of a public kerfuffle is because there was as I understand it, a $20,000 to $30,000 public relations contract to turn it into a kerfuffle. So what could have been and might ideally have been a more collaborative, roll up your shirt sleeves, let's figure this all out, got turned into the kerfuffle that it has become because it got politicized, in my view, unnecessarily and inappropriately. I don't begrudge anybody their right, obviously, to have an opinion or to engage in their free speech, but I just think before people toss phrases like misinformation around, we should ask ourselves just what's caused this brouhaha, as I say, and I think the public relations effort, I put that in quotes, has been unfortunate and counterproductive. So I'll call the question if you like and see if we can get the 2 votes to move the item forward. Thank you. I know time is a factor, and thanks to all who spoke, regardless of their point of view.
Vice Chairperson Smitty.
Aye.
Chairperson Wasserman.
Aye.
Mr. Wasserman, I know we've, thank you. I know we've taken action on the items, but just consistent with the Brown Act, since you and I can't talk much outside of these formal meetings, are there issues that you would like my office and me and county staff to explore with respect to either of the audits going forward? I'm asking so that when these items come to the board, we're all fully prepared for the conversation. I sort of, since I hogged the microphone, quite frankly, earlier on this item.
Thank you. I'm sure it would be confusing to the public, even those familiar with the Brown Act, that you and I are not able to talk about this item outside of public meetings such as this. I'm glad to see going forward that the consolidation will be looked at, as well as different other alternatives. You listed half a dozen of them that should be considered. I look forward to that conversation. What I've learned during this time is, and unfortunately during these times with fires, is the difference in resources needed because of the different terrains. A house fire, I'll just say in Gilroy, to take South County as an example, requires a lot less resources than might otherwise occur with a house fire, say up in Los Altos, because of the terrain or the size of the property or the home, whatever. And the fire department is very interesting and very unique, I think, Supervisor Smitty, in their mutual aid response. And I know when one city, right now the county has sent people, 20 some firefighters to another area to help combat fires. And when we were fighting fires here, Arizona sent people here. So the idea for me of a uniform consolidated district so that resources are available and shared, I'm interested in hearing that further conversation at the board level. I think what we've done today is put the audit, not necessarily behind us because it still goes to the board for a full vote, but I think you and I were supportive, and thank you to Harvey Rose and Cheryl and all those people for those recommendations. Thank you also to the people that you've spoken with, Supervisor Simidian, realizing what exactly the audit was referring to. And we still have another couple of issues to deal with at the board level. I supported both your motions. I think they were both reasonable to move the audit recommendations forward with our recommendation for approval. And I still think we have the bigger resources discussion. And I appreciate what the speakers from Los Altos had to say. Personally, you know, if resources are being sent from Cupertino, San Jose, Mountain View, Palo Alto, wherever, to fight a fire in Los Altos, and Los Altos station has to keep their engine in their station, because you can never be without an engine for medical emergencies, that's an issue that we address. And I think that's a later discussion. I think what we've done today is good work, and I'm satisfied with it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate hearing your thoughts.
Thank you. And again, thanks for the invite, because this is where I can share them with you. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to item number 6, which is to receive the report from the Office of the County Exec relating to land use, relating to a land use compact. There we go. Thought it was off my page for a minute. And Sylvia, I've got you kicking this one off. Sylvia Gallegos, our Deputy County Executive.
Good morning, and I'm just observing that I think people are leaving our meeting, but the good news in this case is I guess we don't need to wait for them to leave. So a quick introduction. I also have with me Elizabeth Pianca, who is a lead in the a lead deputy county counsel, and we worked on this project together. I just wanted to spend one moment sort of setting the stage, as it were. So you will recall on November 1st, Stanford University had withdrawn its application for a general use permit. And at the subsequent board meeting, Supervisor Board President Chavez had made a referral about the possibility of a land use compact specifically focused on San Mateo County jurisdictions. And the idea being that when we have very significant development, that there are regional impacts and opportunities for regional benefits. And certainly, you know, the county through the Stanford GUP process was, I'll say, you know, exercising leadership, particularly through Supervisor Simidian with respect to having those types of conversations. So we did prepare, and it's attached, a framework for a land use compact. And we met with a number of pertinent jurisdictions, not all of them, but ones we thought were important to inform the conversation. And our intent really is to bring it here to, you know, get a reaction, possible guidance with respect to next steps. And so we met first with Mike Callaghy, who is the county manager, County of San Mateo, and then also with the Palo Alto city manager. And by the way, I should also say, when we met with the leadership, we also met with their respective development staff. So we met with Palo Alto city manager, we met with the Mountain View city manager, and also the manager for the city of Menlo Park. And we got really very useful input. And so let me spend a couple of minutes describing that. So there was, I think, general consensus that it would be welcome to have a forum to share challenges and best practices, because we share these challenges, and certainly to the extent you can plan regionally, that would be to our benefit. And Mike Callaghy, we had initially discussed meeting once a year, and Mr. Callaghy had suggested, and in fact volunteered, to host a forum in the North County. So the idea would be meeting twice a year. And again, the notion would be to build upon existing relationships or establish new relationships, because as you know, there's changeover both in administrative staff and elected staff or elected officials. And since we share many of the same challenges, the idea of sharing best practices and sort of sharing the challenges and creating that forum. But also, you know, we were trying to pursue a conversation about what thresholds would we have in place that would trigger a convening of this body again in order to address a very specific, you know, non-residential development application. And, you know, we were trying to seek input with respect to, you know, a square footage threshold, net new jobs created, or, you know, net new housing units. And one of the challenges, there's a couple of challenges I want to raise. So number one, we frankly didn't get really good input with respect to what thresholds would be useful. So for example, the city of Palo Alto says that, you know, potentially in their jurisdiction, a 50,000 square foot development, you know, would certainly be a very significant development in its community, notwithstanding the fact by our standards, we would consider that a relatively small project. So we didn't get a lot of input with respect to that. And then the second challenge I want to raise is that while in theory, you know, people believe that regional planning is a good thing, the actual mechanics of having, you know, particularly if you have district elections where one elected official is represents a particular area where the development occurs, that it's challenging enough, some of them said, to build consensus among, you know, the elected body, then to introduce the idea of involving electeds and administrative staff from other jurisdictions, obviously, you know, makes it infinitely more challenging. And so that was some of the input that we received. So we did, and again, it's attached, share with you an amended framework for a compact. And I'll tell you one, well, the two significant changes, the one I'll repeat, which is convening twice a year rather than once a year. But the other significant change was that we started with a panoply of, you know, potential areas of issues. And everyone recognized that even just dealing with housing and traffic are so significant on their own that they felt it would be a win if we could even get some progress with respect to those two major issues. So with that, as I said at the beginning, you know, our interest really was to share this with you and, you know, have you share your thoughts. And then also, to the extent you have any guidance that you wanted to offer in terms of going forward, we're certainly interested in, and would welcome that. And then let me offer Ms. Pianka, if there's anything I failed to mention that you thought was important or any other comments you wanted to share with the committee.
No, I have nothing further to add. Thank you, Sylvia.
Okay, thank you. So with that, you know, certainly we would turn the conversation over to you for questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Smitty, and before we look for any speakers, do you wish to make any comments?
Just a question or two, if I may, Mr. Chairman, and that is to Ms. Gallegos. As I look at our agenda today and the board enclosure or the committee enclosure, the recommended action is simply to receive the report.
Yes.
And so my question is, assuming we vote unanimously to receive the report in a moment or two, what happens next?
Well, you know, as a practical matter, obviously the report would go to the board with the rest of the Hewlett packet. And it partly depends upon the comments you make. If there seems to be board will to pursue this further, obviously the administration would do so. We're trying to get a sense of, you know, the interest in doing this work further with jurisdictions. We only were in communication with 4 of the many jurisdictions potentially that could be involved in this, because we did want to just get some sense of the reaction and then present it to you. So again, depending upon the reaction by the board, either will be doing more work on this, modifying this in small or large ways, or the board may just decide to receive this, that given everything else we have going on, at the county, that this doesn't rise as a priority. It's really up to the board's discretion about how they want to deal with it.
I guess the one other question I have, and then I have a couple of comments, Mr. Wasserman, before we go to the public. Ms. Gallegos, I wasn't entirely clear to me, and I apologize if I just missed it. I did see the reference to having twice yearly meetings, and I also saw the reference to using a square footage threshold, and I think you landed on 500,000 square feet. What wasn't clear to me is that sort of 2 meetings a year, just on a sort of a regular established basis, plus anytime there's a 500,000 square foot project that suddenly pops up? Or is it,
That's correct. We would have a baseline of 2 meetings a year because, we all observe that it's really important, and you know this from your own work, to have that foundation of a relationship. So then when you have the hard work come forward, you have some goodwill in the bank that you can count on when you're trying to have really difficult conversations. So yes, 2 meetings a year baseline. And then however we land with respect to these threshold triggers. And by the way, we put 500,000, that's not per se a recommendation. It's just something we're offering up as a conversation piece. And as I said, we didn't get a lot of great reaction to it. Or useful sort of.
Sorry to interrupt. So as a practical matter, in any given year, there would typically be, we would expect at least a couple of these meetings. There could be a third meeting if a project popped up, or if a project popped up, it could be folded into one of the regularly scheduled 2 meetings. Am I imagining this correctly?
The way, and certainly it's, it's up to your discretion, but the way we contemplated it is that we would have at a minimum 2 meetings a year, one hosted by the county potentially, and then one hosted in North County with the county San Mateo. And depending upon how many non-residential development applications emerge in the partner jurisdictions, it could result in a lot of meetings. For example, a very big development, I'll just say Facebook or Google, could generate quite a number of meetings. Or you could have relatively few because there aren't very significant developments occurring a year. But at a minimum, you'd have 2 a year as we're proposing it.
Thank you. Supervisor Wasserman, I would just share with you, the referral, of course, comes from our colleague, Supervisor Chavez. I understand it to be born out of the experience we had, or at least in part born out of the experience we had with Stanford University, which was an interesting case because the university has 8,000 acres that are in 6 different jurisdictions, crossing county lines. So unincorporated Santa Clara County, unincorporated San Mateo County, City of Palo Alto, City of Menlo Park, Woodside, and Portola Valley. I should be at 6. And what was interesting is the first time we all sat down and talked about, our sharing our perspectives on what the potential impacts of the GUP application in Santa Clara County might be. As far as anybody in the room knew, it was the first time ever that all 6 jurisdictions, all of which have land use authority and responsibility for Stanford University lands, it was the first time all 6 jurisdictions had ever been in the same room to have the conversation. So it was a sort of an aha moment. And then as we continued to have these conversations, we realized that there were other local players who needed to be in the mix, including but not limited to Redwood City, just a slight bit to the north, even though they were not responsible for Stanford land use on the Stanford lands. They were a key player. East Palo Alto, which clearly was feeling the impact of some of this growth and development, just to name 2. So I think the general concept here is a good one. I think, Ms. Gallegos, you were very tactful, but what I heard was, and correct me if you think I heard it wrong, what I heard was, look, there are limitations to what folks are willing to commit to in advance, but the one thing they are willing to commit to in advance is to sit down and talk and share information and listen to one another and hope that that then leads to some kind of commitment that's substantive if and when the time comes. Did I get it more or less right, Ms. Gallegos?
I think that was a very apt description of what I was trying to communicate.
All right. And I have no opinion today, Mr. Wasserman, on the 500,000 square foot threshold. I'd be hard pressed to pick a number. I think that's probably could use some refinement, but I'll say thank you for addressing my questions. And those are my comments for the moment. If there are public commenters, I'd love to hear from them.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments?
We have no speakers.
No speakers. Thank you, Peggy. So we'll close the public comment portion. Again, this is to receive information only. Sylvia, I do have a couple of questions for you. One, what's being suggested and proposed here is obviously an advisory, not a deciding, not a policy-making committee, more an advisory committee.
I would say yes.
Okay. The reason I'm asking that is for myself, at the end of the day, whoever's making the decision, and Supervisor Simitian brought up Stanford previously, is the deciding making body. Other cities will be impacted by traffic, they'll be impacted by housing, they'll be impacted by jobs, all those things that we went through in the Stanford exercise. But at the end of the day, that's important to me as one supervisor. The other part is, as I look on, and I'm looking on page 294, Sylvia, and Supervisor Simitian, of our packet, the second highlighted says participating counties and cities. And I see town of Atherton, town of Portola Valley, city of Woodside that are highlighted. Are they in the pack that you're proposing, or is that still to be determined? And did these entities listed here ask to be in this group, or are they ones that you envision should be in this group?
Thank you for the question. The original referral focused on County of San Mateo jurisdictions, and you know, it was our perspective that there is significant development on both sides of the border that have regional impacts. And so, you know, we began by compiling this list, and the reason why they're highlighted is that you know, it was a question to us whether there's development in these communities, non-residential development, that would generate, you know, the type of impacts, regional impacts that would merit their participation. Although, you know, as Supervisor Simitian would tell you, they participated in these regional forums that were convened because they have just a little piece of Stanford lands, except for the town of Atherton. And so it's just, from our perspective, we're trying to figure out what makes sense in terms of the mix of jurisdictions to involve in this proposed compact. Thank you.
The mix of jurisdictions for me depends on, again, if it's a PAC, if it's an advisory committee, then I lean towards one way. If it's determined to be more, to have any decision-making authority of any kind, I would be very concerned about the mix, because if you take out Mountain View and Palo Alto from that list, all the others combined would be half our population. And so I just wanted to understand what it was that you were looking at as far as voting rights, if there are voting rights. If they're voting on a recommendation, for me, Sylvia, that's one thing. If they're voting on, if they have the power to vote on anything anymore, I don't think I would understand that, how one entity over here would have the voting right for land use over here, except that that other entity would be impacted. And so I would expect the council members, the planning people, the roads people to show up at, let's say the project's in San Mateo County, to show up at a San Mateo County board meeting and saying, hey, we want you to know our study says this will increase daily road trips. You know, this project, this 500,000 square feet, is not in our city, but it's going to increase our road trips by 75 people a day. And to bring all that, the way the system works now. As far as meeting once or twice a year, I think it's nice to have meetings to just discuss what's going on in the area. But you know how I feel about having more meetings than necessary, and how I feel about having more members than necessary just for the sake of having meetings. That said, when those entities on your list under the second highlight do convene, I'm interested in what your recommendation is. I could see a couple of members under a Brown Act number, obviously. So 2 members from each of those municipalities showing up representing their municipality at this particular meeting. And then bringing forth whatever back to their full board. I don't see five county supervisors from San Mateo and 5 county from Santa Clara and all the council members from Mountain View and Palo Alto and Menlo Park, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I haven't counted the numbers, but I'm sure that would be 50 people, 60 people at a meeting convening twice a year. And I would have a hard time seeing how that would be productive. You go ahead.
So let me be clear. We haven't delved into granular details with respect to membership, but to your point, at least initially, we were contemplating, very specific administrative staff, maybe 1 or 2 from each jurisdiction among the elected officials. I want to be more clear because I think I wasn't earlier that yes, it's advisory. And I think the reason I was hesitating is that I was contemplating, potentially there may be agreements that arise from a work, well down the line, that this body may do in the future that might, result in binding obligations, much like you'd find in a development agreement. But I want to underscore, because I think I was less than clear and I was hesitating that it's intended to be advisory.
Thank you. And you also just mentioned now, which was my question, that you weren't imagining the entire council, the entire board of each entity going to each of the meetings for a variety of reasons. I could see this group meeting together, for instance, to discuss high-speed rail coming through. I could see, meetings like that, but what you're talking about here is 500,000 square feet of non-residential, and that's down to the 3rd bullet now. You also mentioned to be determined net new jobs and new housing units. Before we vote to receive this, we don't even need to vote to receive it. Before we finish this item, do you have any updates on how many new jobs or how many new housing units as you have done with the 500,000 square feet?
Thank you for the question. On all of those proposed thresholds, while we show 500,000 net new square feet, we're not, we were offering these up as conversations with the jurisdictions. And the point I was trying to make is we didn't get a lot of good reaction that would be helpful to say, yes, we all agree it should be 200,000 square feet, or it should be X number of jobs or X number of housing. So to answer your question, we aren't there yet with respect to any notion of consensus about what makes something, regional impacts. And as I said earlier, for the city of Palo Alto, they would suggest that something as small as 50,000 square feet would be something that was very significant to them. And
yes,
so
I think if you go down to Atherton and Portola Valley, the numbers would even get smaller, and Woodside would happen. And I certainly would not want to be supporting, unless certain supervisor wanted to go sit in on those meetings, I wouldn't be supporting sending a couple of supervisors for a 20,000 square foot project in Atherton.
Yes, so there's more work to be done with respect to trying to develop some set of thresholds that people can agree upon would then be a basis for convening another of the meeting of the group beyond the base level of 2 meetings a year.
Yeah, and I certainly don't think one size fits all. With the groups you've got listed here, there's about 10, 3, 6, 7, 8, 11. We spend $18 million a day. That's the size of the budget, I would guess, or half the budget of a couple of these cities. So I appreciate the effort and the idea. I appreciate the regional approach. I appreciate the idea of convening entities that would be impacted: housing, jobs, traffic, transportation. I think, as Supervisor Simidian said, we learned a great lesson with the Stanford project. I had no idea of the 6 different entities that Stanford Lands went over, and at any given time there could be a project on any one of those. So that was all very educational for me. I'll consider this received. We have no public speakers. Supervisor Simidian, any other comment?
Thank you, Supervisor Wasserman. I wanted to underscore something you said earlier, and I'm going to say it a little bit differently in my own words, but I think you hit it right on the head when, you know, what I've heard over the years in working with colleagues in local government is everybody thinks we should plan regionally, and no one wants to give up local control or political sovereignty. That therein lies the dilemma, which is why, as you know, I'm sure it doesn't sound like much, but which is why you sort of land on a commitment to meet. And to your point about, you know, how many meetings and how many folks and all of that, I think what we discovered, and it's just common sense once you say it out loud, in the Stanford exercise, for example, is once you have the first meeting and everybody goes, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Did you know that? I didn't know that. And really, that's going to, and then all of a sudden, if it's significant in the view of the participating entities, people show up and want to show up and want to be included. So, you know, did our later meetings have more people than the earlier meetings? They absolutely did. And to your point, if some of this stuff ended up being hyper local, then, you know, everybody doesn't have to come, and it can be a smaller conversation. But I do think, and Ms. Gallegos referenced it, you know, in the North County and across the county lines, you know, if we have Stanford University as a major player, but also Facebook in Menlo Park and Google in Mountain View and Palo Alto with the Stanford Research Park and the Stanford Shopping Center, developments in, you know, in that area have spillover effects that are undeniable. And I was really impressed that our board and our planning staff and the county staff sort of thought regionally as we were going through that exercise. And I think Supervisor Chavez is absolutely spot on that we need to make sure that we create that vehicle. So I'm happy to receive the report. And if you'd like a motion, I'll make a motion. If not, we'll just say, yep, we got it.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sylvia, we good?
Yes, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 7, which is our final item that wasn't handled on consent. It's an update to the Rural Land Development Standards. And I'm sure we'll start off with Jacqueline on this one. And Jacqueline, just for the record, I've got a 40-minute stop from now.
Okay, all right, we'll be very succinct. Good morning, Supervisor Wasserman and Supervisor Simidian. Jacqueline Anshano, Director of Planning and Development. We're before you today to speak to the update to the Rural Land Development Standards. With me is Rob Eastwood, Planning Division Manager, Virat Singh, Principal Planner over our Long Range team, and the presentation will be presented by Michael Meehan, our Senior Planner. So I'll turn it over quickly to Michael Meehan. Michael?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. And forgive me, my Zoom's telling me that my video is not available at this moment. So I'll share my screen.
Michael, this is Peggy. I have sent a request to start video, and you should still be able to share screen.
All right.
There you go.
All right. So good morning, supervisors. This is again Michael Meehan, Senior Planner, and as Director Anshano introduced, I'll be presenting the committee with a brief addition to the ongoing rural zoning update to include objective residential land development standards in agricultural zoning. So on November 21st of last year, the committee received a report from the department concerning proposed land development standards for non-residential development in the rural unincorporated areas of the county, including but not limited to projects that would currently fall under the local serving provisions of the zoning ordinance. Now, in further evaluating the overall goals and scope of the proposed zoning ordinance amendments, the department is recommending that objective land development standards be applied to residential development in areas zoned exclusive agriculture. As presented in the previous Hewlett meeting on this subject, the new standards are intended to address these three interrelated challenges. While the first challenge is unique to the non-residential development, the latter two goals are equally, if not more, pertinent to residential development. For this reason, in addition to the first four recommendations seen here, which were brought to Hewlett previously, staff is recommending an additional fifth component, which is to prevent the loss of farmland to rural ranchette conversion. As explored during the development of the Santa Clara Valley Agricultural Plan and as discussed at length during the subsequent convenings of the Ag Task Force, the Agricultural Preservation Task Force, rural residential development on prime farmland is the single greatest cause of farmland loss in our county and a significant threat to the continued viability of those agricultural operations in the Santa Clara Valley. Such residential development is also a significant cause of increased traffic and greenhouse gas emissions. Build out under the county's current ag zoning would result in nearly 2 billion additional vehicle miles traveled annually. Excluding lots subject to Williamson Act contracts, the county does not have any limits to footprint or lot coverage for single-family residences in the rural areas, and no required nexus between such development and the surrounding agriculture. Consequently, large estate homes are often constructed on these parcels, creating a residential footprint that effectively prevents the property from ever being used for commercial ag purposes and complicating the existing nearby ag operations. One strategy of the county general plan is to, quote, maintain stable long-range land use patterns, reading that, quote, land use patterns which create the juxtaposition of ag operations and residential development are a disservice to both ag and residential property owners, and, quote, further intrusion of residential and other uses that are incompatible with agriculture should be prevented. Now, these two general plan policies that you see here under the strategy are RC 61 and RC 62 in particular aim to implement this strategy. In particular, I'll draw your attention to RC 62, which is that residential uses in ag areas may be allowed for persons directly involved in on-site ag operations as ancillary or supportive use of agriculture. The Valley Ag Plan identified that the majority of agricultural land converted by rural development has been attributed to the development of these estate homes or rural ranchettes. Development of these low-density single-family residences in rural areas not only leads directly to the loss of that ag land, but as I've said, compromises the ability of nearby properties. So at its meeting on October 25th, 2018, the Ag Preservation Task Force reviewed and recommended pursuing 3 action items that were identified as top priorities in the Valley Ag Plan. Number 1, consideration of a building footprint limitation. At that meeting, the numbers discussed were in the ballpark of 3,500 to 7,000, which would encompass the vast majority of existing homes. A percentage coverage cap for residential development. This would be a la the Williamson Act contracts. And consideration to limit greenfield single-family development in the exclusive ag zone when accessory to or otherwise supportive of the ag use of the property, such as ag housing. Other jurisdictions under threat of rural ranchette development, such as Monterey County, have included these restrictions to residential development on productive farmland soils. With this in mind, staff's recommendation is to further explore and consider these 3 strategies in the exclusive ag zone as part of the ongoing project to establish objective rural land development standards. With the committee's advice and direction today, staff will move forward to include residential development in the scope of the rural zoning update. Our next step is to begin a robust public outreach process for the rural areas. And staff has realized there's a potential for new environmental impacts from this update, specifically with not the residential development standards, but the permit streamlining and deregulation of ag supportive uses, which we discussed at the last meeting on this topic. And so staff's determined that it would be prudent to prepare an environmental impact report, which would be the next step after outreach. Then we will bring a concrete proposal to the Planning Commission and SIMPAC, the San Martin Planning Advisory Committee, before bringing it back to Hewlett for final review, and lastly, consideration by the board. This concludes staff's prepared presentation, and we're now available for any questions or comments from the committee.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Nice job on the page numbers. Supervisor Simidian, before I check on public comment, do you wish to make a comment?
Just to say two things. I noted the ranch lands inclusion. Thank you for that. And much of this area, I know Supervisor Wasserman is familiar to you because it's in your district. And the one thing I have observed over the time we've worked together is that outreach will be key. So I just, it always is, it's part of our responsibility, but I really want to underscore for staff my hope and expectation that there will be robust outreach so that folks don't show up at the 12th hour saying, nobody told us, nobody asked us. I think that would have the potential to unravel a lot of good work that's been done. So thank you for that. That's it for me.
Thank you. Peggy, do we have any speakers?
We have 2 speakers.
Great. 3 minutes each, and let's get going.
One moment. Minor technical issue.
Thank you.
First speaker is Lena IN. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good morning, members of the Hewlett Committee. My name is Lena Ian, and I'm representing the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. The Open Space Authority and Santa Clara County partnered on the Santa Clara Valley Agricultural Plan approved by the Board of Supervisors in 2018, and these proposed staff recommendations are consistent with the plan. We have already lost too much prime farmland, and we know exactly how and why. The Santa Clara Valley Ag Plan found that conversion of farmland to rural ranchette development is the primary driver of farmland loss in the county. These non-agricultural developments have resulted in the conversion of thousands of acres of county ag land to non-agricultural uses. Addressing incompatible land uses in agricultural areas is essential for ensuring the viability and economic productivity of the agriculture in the county. It is time to end development of prime farmland on the valley floor for non-agricultural purposes within the exclusive agriculture zoning, including for single-family homes. The general plan calls for residential development only in support of agricultural operations. So residential development on prime farmland should be limited to agricultural employee housing. The Open Space Authority supports the staff recommendations regarding residential development standards within the rural zoning update. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this item.
Thank you.
Speaker is Julie Hutchison. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good morning, Julie Hutchison, Director of Impact, Green Foothills. We're here to support planning staff's proposal to include the residential development in the rural land development standards for the exclusive ag zone. As staff has stated in their presentation, rural estate homes have been a long-standing issue in terms of their negative impact on farmland. It has been the long-standing gripe of the cities in South County, which have pointed to rural ranchettes as a prime example of the county's lack of stewardship of farmland, and one of the reasons they should be allowed to expand their city's footprints into unincorporated areas with prime farmland. In particular, we appreciate staff's inclusion of new residential development supportive of or an accessory to agriculture. The latter is a clear statement on the purpose of the exclusive ag zone and the county's commitment to ensuring the uses in those zones remain fully compatible with agriculture while meeting the housing needs for this constituency. In addition, having served on the Ag Preservation Task Force, I felt it was clear that our top priority was to find a local funding source for ag preservation. However, I think it's pretty much understood under present circumstances that this is something that may not occur as quickly as we would like. This proposal here can be an important tool that can help further the purpose of the ag plan to help stem further loss. And of course, it is included in the ag plan. And finally, I'd just like to note that item 12 on your agenda today is the progress report for the Office of Sustainability. In the 2020 mid-year sustainability highlights report, they provide a section on resiliency planning in the chapter on climate protection and defense. And there's a subsection on farmland open space preservation. It very much speaks to what is being proposed here, and that of ensuring that we protect these lands for regional climate resiliency. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Supervisor Simidian, I've got a couple of questions if you don't have any at this time.
No, thank you. I had just those two quick comments, and that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, and I see Rob on there, and I know Jacqueline's with us too. Couple of questions for you. On package page 297, the fourth paragraph down that starts with the Ag Task Force, it mentions a residential building footprint with 3,500 square feet to 7,000 square feet. And I just wanted to confirm, I know the word footprint was what was indicated from our meetings before the 8 or 9 months with the ag meetings. And I just wanted to make sure footprint sits in there, because some people look at 3,500 and they read right over footprint and they think square footage. And I know 3,500 square feet of footprint could be 3,500 on the bottom and 3,500 on top. So it actually allows a person a bigger house than they might otherwise think that it does. So I just wanted to get confirmation of footprint being in there. Is that correct?
Through the chair, if I may, that is correct.
Thank you. Thank you. That's number one.
Another way perhaps to think about it is the first floor. When we're doing our data analysis, currently we're looking specifically at the first floor square footage.
And if I may, Supervisor, it's site coverage. We call it footprint, but it's actually site coverage.
Yep.
Because
Yep. So it could be paid. Jacqueline, would that also then apply to all impervious surfaces such as pavement, concrete?
Yeah, we're discussing that still, but we're having conversations about that, because the issue is to preserve the ag land. So we have to take into account the paved areas.
Thank you. And then areas such as gravel, lawns, and landscaping that would be pervious would not be included.
That's what we're looking at this time.
Okay. Okay, good. That was clarification I needed in the wording at different places in the staff report. And I just want to be consistent and easily understood and not misunderstood as far as, I think this is just, this is just receive report.
Yeah, but what we might do, Supervisor, what we might do for clarity is we may, when we bring the actual standards back, call out footprint, call out building site coverage, paved surfaces. We're still having that discussion. So if we come back and it is building site coverage, we'll explain what that means.
Wonderful. Thank you. So it could come back, for instance, with 3,500. Yeah, it could come back with 7,000 square feet of building site coverage, and a person could still add on another 1,000 on top for a second story, which would not affect building site coverage.
That's exactly correct, because we're just looking at what's covering the site. Yep. Where it gets tricky is when they start doing basements and you get into floor area ratio when they do stories, but we're still talking about that issue. And what we've been discussing is site coverage percentage, because then it would be equitable for the size of the lots. So if we get to that place, we'll come back and speak to that.
Great. And I think your point about it, if you've got a single story home on the ground and you have a basement underneath it, certainly you're affecting the same amount of site coverage. And that right. shouldn't be, as most cities don't, take basements against the homeowner.
Right.
Great. That would be number one for me. Number two, on page 8, PowerPoint slide page 8, Mr. Meehan, you mentioned the process going through the San Martin Planning Commission, our Planning Commission, the board, et cetera. Is this something, and with the outreach that Supervisor Simitian said, is this something you're envisioning coming to the board in 12 months, 6 months, 18 months? Do you have any envisioned timeline at this point?
Michael Meehan here, Senior Planner. The restrictive element of this really will be the preparation of the environmental impact report, and that's why we thought it was really important to acknowledge that we, as a staff, have determined that need. That will probably set us our current estimate. Of course, there's a lot of unknowns in general in our staffing of these comprehensive planning projects currently, but our hope would be that it would appear before the board approximately a year from now.
Got it. Thank you for that. And my last question for whomever appropriate, we're all in favor, I believe, one size or another, of increasing our ag housing. And there's areas that we're allowing ag housing, areas we're not allowing ag housing. We're going through this whole learning curve now on ways to make that happen. And what I wanted to know and what you're proposing here as you move forward and what you present to the San Martin Planning Commission, what you would share or express in the EIR application is ag housing then excluded? Is that like an ADU? I know a person building a house, they're allowed X number of square footage based on the FAR, as you brought up, Jacqueline, but an ADU is separate from that. A basement is separate from that. Are you envisioning when you use these various square footages of lot coverage that ag housing would be treated like an ADU?
If you want, I can weigh in to start.
Please, Mr.
Michael and Jacqueline, if you have thoughts. Yeah, we, you might remember Supervisor Wasserman, this came up on the task force, I think a year or two ago.
Yes.
And for lack of a better term, the threat, right, is the estate development. But you don't want to make the restriction so tough that if someone's putting out housing that supports ag workers that are out there to pick the fields, that you don't exclude that. So I think we just have to look at that a little closer. I think the objectives are absolutely clear. You don't want to set this bar where you prevent ag worker housing. So I just don't think we've sorted that out yet, but it's a huge consideration in our minds. And when we come back, to make sure we don't do that.
Great, thank you. I'm glad it's on the list to consider. I appreciate that. Supervisor Simitian, that's all I've got, and this is a receive. We didn't have any additional public comments. So unless there's any other comments by staff or supervisor, we'll consider 7 received.
I just make 3 brief comments, Supervisor Wasserman.
Yes.
Outreach, outreach, outreach. That's
Sure.
it.
No. Outreach will definitely occur, and the people of South County are not shy about expressing their feelings, as you may have similar experiences in North County. So
indeed.
We've got that done. Okay, that was item number 7, which was the last item not already addressed on our agenda. So with that, I'll say thank you to everyone. Our next meeting is October 15th. Unbelievably, today is the 6-month anniversary of our shelter in place. So I'm hoping that as the air clears and presidential elections are over and things continue to get better for all of us, I start to see all your smiley faces in person sooner than later. Take care, all of you. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor. Bye-bye.